and they have been part of what's been driving overdevelopment for years. And in fact, in particular, Mr. Mensch has been supporting the Center of Excellence for years and years and pushing forward with making sure that the Center of Excellence gets approved. And only when the public turned against the project has it become clear to him that he can't win the mayoral seat supporting the project, so he decided to oppose the project, and it's very disingenuous. We, on the other hand, have never supported the project. I do like the overall concept, but I think the project is way, way too big for that parcel, and the biggest concern I have is traffic. It's going to cause very significant overcrowding of that area. And I really hope that the planning board is able to find a way to scale the project back very substantially. Unfortunately, Mr. Mensch and his colleagues at the Township Council have pushed the project so close to fruition that it's going to be hard for the planning board to scale it back at this point. But I do hope and will continue to push for them to do so.
Well, a lot of very good points there. I don't want to interrupt, Jeff. Please go ahead.
I was just going to say that the second major issue that we're running on is infrastructure. Roads is the biggest component of that because there are a lot of roads in town that are falling apart, and people are complaining about particular roads and saying this one needs to be fixed, has needed to be fixed for a decade, and the Township Council and the mayor, knowing about this, don't allocate the resources necessary to fix the roads in town. But we're not talking just about roads. When we talk about infrastructure, we've also been identifying a lot of problems with sewers around town. If you look at and when I say sewers, I mean the inlets off of roads where there were grates that water goes into. If you look around those, you'll notice a lot of them have holes. And if you get down on your hands and knees and look at the holes, these are deep sinkholes, and some of them have actually opened up. It's dangerous, and it's something that if you maintain it properly, you can prevent them from going bad, but instead they're just letting these decay. And it's expensive to fix, and I'm sure that's why they're not paying attention to it. But we need to pay more attention to infrastructure because these are, an upper middle class town like Bridgewater really should have better infrastructure than we have. The third issue we're running on is more responsible budgeting. That, of course, includes trying to keep a cap on taxes, trying to avoid raising taxes at all if you can. But what distinguishes our side from the other is that they're so desperate to be able to brag about keeping taxes flat that they're borrowing more and more money every year. It's not responsible to raise taxes on your kids and grandkids so that you can brag about not raising taxes on yourself. And so we really believe that we need to cut the budget where we can, not taxes as the first step, but cut spending where we can. But if we decide we absolutely have to spend a certain amount of money and that requires a tax increase, then we will raise taxes on ourselves instead of on our children and grandchildren. But again, first and foremost, we will look for ways to avoid doing that in the first place.
So a few follow-up questions, if I could. One, going to a council meeting and seeing Mr. Mensch stand up and make the case against the development project on 206 doesn't tell the whole story. He looks like a very animated and very aggressive opponent, but you're pointing out that he's in fact been a key enabler of the project and now only recently has voiced his displeasure. You say that you've opposed it in the main for a longer period of time?
I don't know about for a longer period of time because I don't know exactly when he flip-flopped. I know that he supported it as late as the last time it came before the Township Council. I was not really all that aware of what the project entailed and the scope of the project because, and this brings us to something we've also been talking about, which is transparency in the municipal process. They do not do a very good job. In fact, they make no effort to make information available publicly. So for example, the law requires when you're going to vote on a resolution that you post it in advance and make it available to the public. But it doesn't require that you put it on the internet. But just about every municipality I'm aware of, and the Board of Ed that I'm on, puts documents on the internet in advance of meetings and has hard copies of documents available at meetings so that the public can actually know what's going on. The Township Council puts out cryptic agendas that don't really tell you what's going on. And then they say, if you want copies of these documents, you need to show up at the township municipal offices during regular business hours and request copies. And so what ends up happening is they make decisions and the public is blissfully unaware that it's happening. So as Matt was supporting this project over years and years and years, approving the property as a redevelopment zone, appointing a redeveloper, approving the redeveloper's plans, rezoning the property for what they're doing, and all of these are successive votes over a long number of years, very few people in Bridgewater knew this was even happening. And because of that, it got very close to the end of the property of the process, and then they're before the planning board actually looking to approve plans, looking to confirm that the plans agree with the system that the mayor and council put in place. And only now is the public really aware of what's going on, and that's when the opposition came about. So my opposition has really started as it became clear to the town and to me what the mayor and the council were doing. And I'm not going to use the word secretly because it wasn't quite a secret, but they weren't going out of the way to involve the public either.
When you talk about a project to scale of that neighborhood, what would that look like? In other words, what elements of the current plan would you want to see discarded so that it's more in keeping with that area?
It's really hard for a non-expert like myself to say that, and I would really want to sit down with professional planners and professional engineers who are able to assess the issue. What I would say for certain is that I don't trust planners and engineers who are hired by developers, because those guys will say what they need to say to get the property or the project approved for that property. So I know it's too big. I know that, when you start thinking about 400 apartments, which brings a lot of background traffic in and out and congestion to the area, but also grocery stores are notorious for having very heavy traffic, especially at rush hour with people running in and out. And that area is already overcrowded. But there are also a lot of other things. There's a hotel going in there, or at least the proposal is for a hotel to go in there, and a brew pub, and a handful of restaurants and retail, in addition to the uses that are already there, which is very successful, the incubator research space. You add all of that up to a road that's already very congested, and it doesn't smell right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if they could scale it back significantly, I don't know, I can't tell you whether half of the use or a third or a quarter or 2/3 would be the right size, but it certainly needs to be less stuff crammed into one little property.
Jeff, talking to people keyed into this race on the insider side of the equation, they talk about a ground game for Mensch, that he's out there, he's mobilizing troops. Do you believe that you're doing the same thing? And if so, can you tell me a little bit about it? Ground game.
Absolutely. So Mr. Mensch has been out, I don't know about all day, every day, but he certainly has been knocking on more doors than I have. Unfortunately, my day job requires me to actually earn a living for my family.
What is your day job?
I'm an attorney with a practice here in Bridgewater. So I've been out almost every evening. I've been out during the day almost every weekend day, although sometimes life gets in the way. So I certainly am pounding the pavement. One of my running mates is retired. He has knocked on thousands of doors. I would guess he's knocked on more doors than Mr. Mensch has. I don't know that for a fact. But we have certainly been out there campaigning. We're also, out there doing all the things you would expect, having meet and greets and raising money. We're also doing a lot of work on Facebook. Social media is something that is the modern way to get things going.
Sure.
And I think that we're heading in the right direction. I'm getting very good feedback. I think that we'll get the support of the vast number of Democrats and a very substantial number of Republicans. I've talked to personally to over 100 Republicans who plan to support me, and that's just a small sampling of the town as a whole. So I think we'll get at least near 1,000, if not over 1,000 Republican votes, and I think that's going to end up being the difference.
You mentioned at the top of this interview that it's not a race conditioned so much by national politics and trends as it is by local issues. But the town has changed, has it not? It has become more democratic. There are more Democrats in town now. Do you feel the saturation of larger conversations in this race?
Absolutely. So I certainly think, and again, you have to break it up with national versus local. I think when you look at the national issues, when you know the fact that the town has a very large and growing ethnic community in a large number of ethnicities. Um, they don't vote as a ubiquitous bloc. You can't say that Indians always vote
Right.
Democratic or this or that, but they do statistically support our side more often than the other, and so I think that's contributing to the trend, and I think that will continue to contribute to the trend. But in terms of municipal races, I really think it is more about the issues. I think that people are dissatisfied with the leadership they've gotten out of the Republican Party. They're dissatisfied with the hostility that people within the Republican Party have shown to each other. And I think that people are ready for a change. That's why our motto for our campaign is Change for Bridgewater.
Really appreciate the time this evening. The last question I have relates to a presentation made at the last council meeting by the head of the quarry. He talked about a blast that impacted the quality of life of the children at the middle school, and dust that was kicked up, he claims, simultaneous to the blast that occurred at the quarry, Jeff. And I'm asking if you are familiar with his testimony and whether you believe the testimony. In other words, he said that there were two separate incidents. There was a quarry blast, and that was the noise at the time, and that there was a dust situation that came from the track at the school. Any comment on that, or any information that you have about that incident?
No, I can tell you that what I've heard from both sides doesn't make sense. I think that the truth is something that we'll probably never know. I don't think that what either side is saying makes sense. But I'm no expert, so I can't say. Is it possible that a blast would have rippling effects underground through rocks and cause dirt to stir up elsewhere? I've heard some people say that. I haven't heard anyone who I think knows what they're talking about
Right.
say that. So
Right.
I'm not prepared to say that it was the fault of the blast or that it wasn't the fault of the blast.
Right.
And I don't think we'll ever know, because we don't have the, we'd have to pour huge amounts of resource and investigation into figuring it out.
Thank you, my friend.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank